common last name, which means that we're married.
In some states. You can't.
No, actually, this is my father, Dr. Henry, professor at PBA.
And it's my last podcast right there. That's
and he's walking out right now.
I'm
so
out of
this
here.
is a bad idea. Both of us could be clients and therapists at the same time.
Maybe we are.
So we brought him in. He is a kind of an expert in substance abuse and has done a lot of talks and written a book and done some work consulting and helping pretty big and large treatment centers, including one that was Sons, which was
That's true.
pretty interesting.
That was sort of the apex, the high point of my life right there.
Me too. So he was going to come with us and talk a little bit about his experience in the substance abuse field, some of the newer things that are going on. There's a lot of stuff in the field now. We're headed more towards a digital age, and science is advancing in the medical field as well. And it's interesting, the more technology we get, the more and more that they are kind of viewing substance abuse as an actual medical condition or disease. But not only that, they're able to point to different parts in the brain and how they function. And it's not just this guessing game anymore. There's things that we're looking at. So what are some of the advances that you've seen in the field, or maybe some common things that were taught that are no longer believed?
Well, we used to believe that the brain, like when you were born, that you didn't get any more neurons or brain matter, but that's not true. I mean, our brain grows and advances at every time. As long as we're alive, we're still growing, which is actually kind of cool.
Wow.
So the thing that's positive about that is you have hope, right? Because no matter what's happened, this is interesting to me, this is how crazy it gets. They had a guy and he lost his sense of equilibrium.
Uh-huh.
So he lost connection to the nerves in his inner ear.
Okay.
And they were able to rewire it through nerves connected to his tongue.
What?
So he was able to not be dizzy and stand up, and they taught him to do that using parts of the brain that was connected to his tongue. That's how plasticity works in the brain, and that you can get different things to connect with different things. So if you have an area that's damaged, you literally can, like if you have a detour, a road that's out in a certain place, you can detour around that and use different roads and get to the same place by using the detour. And the brain has the ability to crazily do that if there's a damaged part or another part that's not working as well. It's like, well, you know what, we can't use this as well, so we'll go over and we'll use this secondary road, and that will become the major road. And then after you use it, that becomes a major pathway. It wasn't in the beginning, but it eventually becomes a major pathway. That's real hopeful for people who have had head trauma. It's real hopeful for people who have damaged parts of their brain. It's real hopeful for people who have weak parts of their brains to say, if I work on it, and if I repeat the same behaviors and go in the same direction, I have a very good chance of functioning in a very good way, because the brain can adapt to the way that I'm functioning. I just think that's pretty cool. Now, you were mentioning the advances because of fMRIs and SPECT scans.
Did you say fMRIs?
Yeah, functional MRIs, which are looking at blood flow, and even some PET scan. I mean, there's different scans. You can look at blood flow and the way the brain is working. I've looked at and looked at a lot of reports where they do CAT scans, and it's just an X-ray of the brain.
Okay.
A lot of times the structure in the brain looks absolutely fine, right? The structure looks fine, but that's not telling you how it's working.
Right.
It's just like that's the structure. The
Yeah.
problem with that, and I've looked at lots of reports where we do psychological testing on people and we can see deficits in those areas, but we look at an x-ray and the x-ray looks like it's fine. And then you're like, well, that's just stupid. Like, what's going on with that? Now we're actually looking at the brain as it's functioning. There's two main areas of brain that are connected with addiction. There's more, but two main areas are the frontal, the prefrontal lobe, which is right in the front, and three maybe. The cingulate, which is a part of the brain deep in the brain, kind of in the mohawk section, right in the middle, but in the back. And then
Is
there's
that a punk rock term? That's a real medical term?
mohawk. I don't know if that's a medical term, but cingulate.
We're going to say it is.
Cingulate gyrus, or some people say gyrus. I don't know.
How about the mullet?
The mullet is not a part of the brain, but it is
The mullet region?
it is a part of the country where if you go there, you will see more mullets than there are in other places.
No, keep going with what you're saying.
Yeah. So
The Mohawk region.
the Mohawk region, what you see in some addictions, they say 60 to 80% of addictions, is that there is a down regulation in the frontal lobe.
That high of a number.
Yeah, I mean,
Wow.
it's because planning, judgment, reasoning are all in that region. And if you think about it,
In what region?
that frontal lobe,
So say that again for our viewers out there. The frontal lobe.
the
those
frontal
things.
lobe does executive planning, it does impulse control.
What is executive planning?
Executive planning is like, if I do this, then this will happen. I want to
okay.
I want to get a degree in school,
Mm-hmm.
right? Oh, what do I have to do first? I have to call them. Then I have to apply. Then I
Okay.
want to get a date,
Yeah.
right? How do I do that? Oh, will you go out? I mean, you
Right,
might.
right.
There might be some other steps in there.
Yeah.
And the frontal lobe breaks those big tasks down into like little pieces, and then helps you like do those little pieces to get where you want to go.
So that's kind of related to the all or nothing thinking. With
All or nothing
addictions,
thinking,
that
because
kind of-
you don't know exactly how to step it out. And this, I mean, if you think about it, this is
Yeah,
a genius.
makes a lot of sense.
This is a genius of the 12 steps,
Yeah.
because it says, oh, just don't keep running at something full speed and crashing into it. There
Right.
might be some steps you want to take
Yeah.
before you just try to fix everything in your life.
Yeah.
Because
right.
because you're like, it's like, I'm gonna fix everything, and then like 10 minutes later, like,
Yeah.
crap, I can't do it. I'm not doing any of
That's
it.
all or nothing.
All or nothing
you know,
thinking.
Even in the positive way, it's still not balanced.
It's almost as bad, because what you do is you over expectate, and you try too hard, and then
Right.
you give up, and then you try too hard, and then you give up, and you try too hard and give up, because the frontal lobe is not giving you the pieces to work on
Uh-huh.
and giving you the impulses of, I just want to do that right now. No. If I'm going to go through the steps, this is the next thing to do to get where I want to get to. See what I mean? I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, that's important, because most things that in life that are worthwhile are actually complicated, right? Well,
Right.
either they have multiple steps, or multiple steps and then feedback. You just don't go like, hey, I want to marry you. I mean, you could, but you might want to like have some interaction, get some feedback from
Right.
them.
Well, who that works on too, you know.
If it does work, then you probably
you
should
know,
marry them,
right.
and that would be like a big mistake.
Right.
So probably not very good. So that's the frontal lobe, and I think it's connected to a lot of
And so that was the executive
functioning,
branch.
functioning of it, or branch of the brain.
Okay, and
Impulse control.
impulse control.
And then just sort of your judgment and reasoning.
Okay.
Is this a good thing to do? Is this a bad thing? Your conscience, like.
Mhm.
And if you have that decently strong, you're like, I just want to go do this, and then you just do it, right? And then
Yeah.
later on, you're just like, oh gosh, what?
Jiminy Cricket.
That's exactly what the frontal lobe is.
Jiminy
it's Jiminy
Cricket.
Cricket.
Yeah.
For some people, they have stamped on and killed Jiminy Cricket. It's a funeral of Jiminy Cricket. Jiminy Cricket has died, and it's just like, like, you shouldn't do that. They step right on him, and he's gone, and it's like, oh
they
my.
They put him on a hook, on the cane pole.
And they go fishing with Jiminy Cricket. Oh, no, I'm really important. No, you're not. Get out there. You're going to catch me a big fish. It's a problem because what you have is really good people who can't get to where they want or even get to good things because they shortcut it so much. And I think that's the sad part of it.
And it's happening, this is happening physically, like they're not conscious of this, right?
No, physically, and it happens with every known drug.
Okay.
Every known drug and alcohol. You get a lowering of dopamine, which is the major neurotransmitter that sort of turns that part of it on.
Okay.
Lowering of dopamine to a great degree, specifically in that part of the brain, which means what? It means that you kind of soup yourself up and you go higher, but then you're dumber afterwards, and you keep doing it. So you make
extreme highs and lows,
dumber and dumber decisions.
Yeah.
Because you're not looking at the consequences. It would be like you're investing money, and it's a great investment for today.
Yeah.
But after a week, you lose all your money. So you're like, oh, it's awesome. How is it? It's awesome. End of the week. How is it? I have no money. Okay, that wasn't a good long-term plan, right? It was a great short-term plan, and I felt great for that moment. Now, if you compound that and look, you acted impulsively over a whole year, right? Now, you've basically, you basically have made one bad decision over another, and now you're so far behind that you feel pretty hopeless, and that's unfortunately where some people are. Now, the cingulate is different in that rather than having impulsive behavior, you have compulsive behavior. Now, the difference is compulsive behavior is I have to do this. Impulsive behavior is, oh look, I'm going to do that. Somebody asks you to do something, you do it because you don't have any brakes to stop.
Right. Compulsive behavior is,
you know what? I have to have a drink. I have to have the drug. It's that I must and I have to part of your brain. And it just is like a little hamster wheel. So you're going to sleep and it's like revving around. It's part of what cravings do. It's part of what OCD is like.
That's what I was thinking of, the obsessive compulsive disorder. So the compulsion, again, is that something caused by this and what you were talking about before with your frontal lobe? Is this like caused by trauma? Are you born with certain areas not as active? How does it happen?
The answer to that is yes. In other words, you can be born with a certain bent towards being obsessive, and compulsive. There are just some people born with, like, it's a kind of an OCD thing. They have it in their families, You can also have it with trauma because it can take what was mildly compulsive and make it really compulsive.
Okay.
If you look at trauma does both things. It actually lowers the frontal lobe activity to the point where, this is interesting to me, there's a part of your frontal lobe that's where your self is, your sense of yourself. Like, how do I know who I am? If I ask most people, like, where's your sense of self? Most people don't go, I feel I'm back here, You're just like, probably not. Or I'm in my knees, right? Or in my fingers. Most people go like, I don't know, I feel like my sense of being present is like right here. In Eastern religions, they call it the third eye, like your consciousness. But there is a part of you called the default state network, which is a part of the frontal lobe, and it's like who I am and what my purpose is.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. So, how did they decide that?
What?
How did they discover that?
what they did is they looked at lots of people who had been abused, and they looked at their frontal lobes, and they were downregulated. There was no
pertaining to self-esteem, self-image, things like that.
They looked, and this is what we can do in the newer technologies.
Okay.
We can actually look at people, and kids when they're little, if they have had trauma, they don't recognize themselves in the mirror.
Right.
That sense of self, you know what I mean, is so. Just think about that. You look at something like in a mirror, and you don't know who that is.
Wow.
And you're not little, because it happens when you're little. I mean, you develop your sense of self. They have something called the Rouge test, which is when kids are real little. They put
on makeup.
They put a little makeup on their nose, and when they look in the mirror, if they think it's them, they'll rub it off.
Huh.
But if they don't think it's them, they just smile at the person in the mirror. They're like, "Oh, look, there's a person smiling at me." They have no sense. It's like your dog. You know, your dog will bark at the mirror sometimes, and it thinks like there's another dog or something there. Well, little kids are like that. But at some point in your life, when you're real little, you realize, "Oh, that's me," and I'll rub the rouge off, or I'll rub the thing off my nose.
Well, what if you like it?
Well, then you probably pose and smile, I guess.
Then you have other
Then you have other issues, and that takes a long time to work around those.
Yeah.
But on the positive side, you have a whole career. Going back to the default state network, that's just down-regulated, and so as a part of the frontal lobe and part of addiction, like one of the things is like rediscovering who I am and what my purpose is helps turn that back on in some way. Rather than think about the compulsive things that I worry about all the time and just grind them into the ground. Just same thought over and over. I gotta have that drink, I gotta have that drink, I gotta have that drug, I gotta go do it. That occupies all the space. So what happens to your sense of self? Your sense of self never really develops. I mean, sadly, this other part has just pushed out, like that sense of who you are.
Wow.
I mean, so literally the person just becomes, we drop down to sort of the animal level, which is like your dog. I just got to get a drink. I just got to get a drink. I just got to get something to eat. I just got to lay down.
I've heard that from a lot of people, really struggling with mental health issues or really struggling with addiction. Like, we're talking hitting bottoms, but it's like, you'll hear things like, I've just been surviving. I've just been, I'm alive. I've just been living, I don't, there hasn't been substance, but I've just been living, getting by. And I remember early on when I got my first job in the field, I had Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it was amazing how low some of those people were on that basic chart.
Yeah, and that's sad. And this is dialectical behavioral therapy is interesting. We can talk about that at another time. But one of the things it says is people are doing as good as they can do. So let's not look down on them because they're struggling, right? But they can do better. But let's also not do the ceiling on them and go like that's all you're ever going to become, because that's insulting and disrespectful as well. No, you've managed to survive and make it in life doing what you're doing. And I know people. I know people who have done prostitution. I know that they've done a lot of bad things in robbery and treated people horribly. Not because they're trying to do that. They're just trying to survive, and they certainly don't agree with the choices they made, but they were just trying to make it and live.
Yeah.
Okay, you've managed to survive. Now let's see if we can gradually go towards what you want. And get this network turned on a little bit to be who you were made to be and who you want to be. And that often is like these very small steps of turning that brain back on. And Peter Levine talks about it like a spring that gets sprung out and goes back and gets sprung out. In trauma, it gets sprung out, and then when it goes back, it just gets stuck. So it can't respond to the pressures of life by just springing a little bit because of the trauma it's had. It's just like a slinky, all stuck down. It can't respond to everyday stresses in everyday life. It can't be present in everyday life. So the idea there is you want to calm down the part that's just obsessing, get that a little bit quieter, and turn on the part that is responding to everyday life in, they call it titration, which is in a little drop, just a drop. Like they were saying, if you take a acid and you pour it into a base, you'll get an explosion. Right?
Yes. I've done that.
Yeah. You have.
Anarchist Cookbook.
There you go. But if you take a dropper
I shouldn't have said that.
and you do a drop by drop into it,
Yeah.
it will drop and then go up and drop and go up and drop. And you can pour the same amount in and it won't explode. The problem with a lot of people is we try to take them from a state where it's not turned on and to where they're obsessing, and we try to get them full blown into turning everything back on.
Right.
And we wonder why it explodes.
Right. Yeah.
Right? And then you're like, well, they simply can't do that. And here's the problem. A lot of people who can do that are encouraging people to try that.
Right.
Very well-meaning people. They're like,
course.
pick yourself up by your own bootstraps and
Yeah.
you can do it. And this is like good advice for 90% of the people or 80%. But in those people
Probably
who
like 10% of people.
man, maybe it's not that good. Unfortunately, it's a lot of people who are like sometimes religious, sometimes whatever, and it's very well-meaning. But the problem is, it actually has the opposite effect. You end up with the person having big explosions all the time,
Right.
and then feeling worse about themselves in the end because they're failing at
Or making
everything.
major life decisions, like huge changes. I mean, like I've seen so many people that they are military brats. Like I can't tell you how many clients I have that are military brats. Like dad grew up Army, Navy SEAL, FBI, policeman, doesn't matter. That mentality, not gonna listen to your emotions, figure it out. And, if somebody has that same brain as you, the same wiring as you, that's great. What I don't understand is that most people think that everyone else has their type of brain.
Yeah, and that's you know how you were asking at the beginning, like, is it genetic?
Yeah.
And so it's genetic and it's trauma, but it's also if you have a parent who doesn't match the way that you are, and I've had the same thing. I had a bunch of people recently who are very feeling, very emotional,
Well,
very.
I don't think any parent matches their
very
child.
feeling, and now you have this authoritarian parent that is telling them, you must be this way.
Right.
Right?
Of course they're gonna rebel.
Well, you can't do it the way somebody else tells to do it. I mean, how can you live your life the way that somebody else tells you to do it? I mean, if you want to make yourself crazy, then you take somebody else's way of living and live it, right? Because in that case, we talked about the default state of the network and how you yourself, you're saying to your brain, don't be like that. You're saying to your body, don't think like that. You're saying to your emotions, don't feel like that.
Yeah.
Sort of like driving your car with maybe your windshield blacked out. I mean, how far would that get? How far could you go before you run over the curb and?
Well, and then learning too how complex the brain is. I mean, it's just the more you learn about how the brain works, the more you learn about how you can change your physical. I don't just mean your physical brain, but I mean how you can actually make these new pathways and create new neurons and change your serotonin and dopamine chemistry by talking and breathing exercise and yoga. It's amazing.
And we don't think about when you do those things, the brain is physically changing, right?
Say that again, because I think that's a very misunderstood, and also I think it's just not widely recognized.
Yeah, when you meet people, when you do different things, when you take different supplements, even when you're ill or when you're healthy, your brain is changing because of that. Now, you have a part in shaping your brain, so you can do brain surgery on yourself, in that your brain can be different next year than it is right now by the choices that you make. And what I'm suggesting is, we talked about this before, not just mixing the two things together and getting an explosion, but starting in that frontal lobe to turn it on just a little bit. To me, it's a lot like exercise. I've had a lot of people, I've worked with weight loss for a while, and the biggest mistake...
Well, your brain is a muscle, right?
It is a muscle. The biggest thing I found is that people start too hard, go too hard, right? They're overweight, I start to work with them on their weight, and they start an exercise program. What do? They go out and they haven't walked on a treadmill, or they haven't done a stair stepper, and they do it for 45 minutes.
Or they join a boot camp workout.
Right, and they do it for 45 minutes, or they do an hour thing.
All right.
Then they tear something or injure, or they can't get even out of bed the next day, and they say to themselves, like,
I'm never doing that.
I am never doing that again. Right, as opposed to, let's walk a half mile, or let's walk around the block.
Yeah, exercise sucks. Like, no, it doesn't. That what you just did just sucked.
Well,
and at this time, that might be great in a year.
Yeah, that would be like a marathoner. A guy, I want to be a marathoner. So I went out yesterday and ran 10 miles. Like, how'd that work for you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, well, you damaged your legs, you hurt your knees, you've injured everything, and you literally can't walk now for a week. But we do the same thing with our brains, in that those parts that are down-regulated and those parts that are obsessive, to cool them down and to bring them more active, really small steps.
And when define down-regulated.
Down-regulated just means it's supposed to be out of 10.
Yeah.
It's working out of 5.
Okay.
I have 8 cylinders in the car. I got 4 of them working.
Okay.
So my capacity in terms of impulse control and planning and everything else is at 50%. Now, there's things that we can do to bring that up.
Yeah.
But if you really want to bring it up, just do cocaine tomorrow. That'll be awesome. Your brain will turn all the way on. Unfortunately, the next day, it'll go down to 35%.
Right.
And you're like, so how did that work out? Well, yesterday awesome, today 35%. I'm worse than I was 2 days ago. And then what people do in the compulsive thing is like, again, do it again, and again, and again. Well, now I'm running at 20%.
Yeah.
Super. See what I mean? It's like the more I do it and the more I put into it, the worse that gets. And it's like I'm digging a hole to get out of it.
Gotcha.
Okay, well, how did that work? That wasn't great. Again, not the person's attention. The person's intention is, I just want to turn that part back on.
Right, right.
So I'm going to do it with either...
So you're self-medicating.
You're self-medicating. And behavior, you do it with people, you do it with behaviors, you do it with gambling, you do it with shopping, you do it with other things too. But you're trying to get that back to that 10. What I talk about, chasing the dragon, or saying, you're trying to get back to the 10, just get back. Well, when you push it to a 12 or whatever, which is beyond what you normally would do, just a normal functioning, then it drops just way down. And now my normal is so low, I'm at 20 or 25%, that I have to use not to get back to 10, but just to get back to 5.
And that, to me, that is when it goes from recreational drug use to addiction, or DSM, abuse to dependence.
Yeah, and now
It's
there's...
when you need that to get to the new baseline, which is low.
Right.
You know, like, there's people who do cocaine or drink alcohol, smoke marijuana, you know, once a week, maybe once a month, and maybe there's a few days of their brain getting back to it. When you get to the point where you're consistently doing it, and it is long enough to be a habit, then it changes. It changes.
Yeah.
And you can see that changing.
Yeah,
People. You can see that point.
It becomes like a supporting wall in the building.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, now that it's a supporting wall, if I knock that wall down,
Yeah.
my whole house is starting to fall down.
Right.
It's not a matter of... so if we're going to try to move away from the addiction, we have to build other walls inside.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can take the substance away, because we've revved up the system from 20% to 25 to 50 to 75%. Now I don't need this thing from the outside as much as I did,
Right.
just to function. Unfortunately, and it is a problem, it has to be done almost drop by drop or step by step.
Yeah, it takes time.
It takes time. And the brain is wonderful at healing,
Yeah.
but the brain is a slow healer. You know?
So what do you? I have a question on that, but I want to wrap this part up.
Yeah.
And then I have a few questions on it, just from a viewer's view.
Yeah.
But so you have these stages of relapse, and then you have the stages of recovery.
Right.
So something that I've heard, and I've heard different numbers thrown around, but it's kind of the general idea of it, and I wanted to see if you knew this. What they say, like, for every learned behavior or for drug use, every year of drug use, it would take roughly a month of positive.
Yeah, I actually teach some of that. But
Uh-huh.
a minimum of 3 months
Okay.
to just get out of the physiological stuff.
Post-acute withdrawal.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. You're going to have problems sleeping, eating, thinking, managing emotions, connecting. Those things within the first 3 months. Kind of the same way if you were on any medication and you just came off of it. You'd have some
Right.
swings with that. But then, if you think about it, your brain and your world and your connections
Mm-hmm.
and your career and your life starts to be built around an addiction.
Mm-hmm.
You don't just have to change your brain when you're changing addictions. You have to change your friendships. You might have to change your career. You might have to change other things. That doesn't happen just, quickly. So it does take some time, not just in the brain and your body, but it takes some time in your environment. Because,
Mm-hmm.
look, the only way I related to people was when I was high.
Right.
All right, well,
Right.
now I have to do that without being high. The only way I did my job
Mm-hmm.
was using. Okay, well, how do I do my job?
Right. Yeah. I've heard that a lot.
How do I
Date.
How do I date? How
I've
do I
heard
handle
that.
my emotions? I'm upset. Okay.
Yeah.
I used to just go smoke, and
Right.
and then, gee, how was it? It was better. Okay,
Yeah.
well, I'm not going to do that. Oh crap!
I'm
like,
not
what, like-
smoking anymore at my breaks. Since I've stopped smoking, I really realized that being a sandwich chef at Burger King really sucks.
Right, and
You know?
so now it's not just thinking about. Think about this: getting rid of the drug and alcohol is one piece, right? Finding a life
Mm-hmm.
and doing something that you're excited and interacting in the world in a positive way is a completely different set of skills. If you think about it, just this clears the weeds out of the garden. Right? We just cleared the weeds out and we tilled the soil. Now I have to plant something and grow it. That doesn't happen overnight. It might take quite a bit, and that's why, if you take it, we talked about that time frame.
Yeah.
It's the time frame. It's not to clear the weeds and everything. It's, well, what do I want to grow, and what do I want my life to be like? And we all know that that's a little bit of a longer process that involves understanding myself, other people, my opportunities, and I would say a fair amount of hit and miss. In other words, we try stuff, but it sucks, and then I have to do something else.
So, head trauma in particular, you know, how long does that take? You know,
that's well, that's a whole nother deal, because your brain is so soft, it's kind of like butter. And if you've had that head trauma, and this is unfortunate, but some things you have for the rest of your life. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't rewire them, do them better and whatever, but this is why you want to be careful with your brain, because it's so, you have 100 billion neurons, you have 20,000 glial cells or other cells and connections. I mean, there's more.
So you have a few to spare.
Well, there's more connections in your brain than there are stars in the universe, right?
Wow.
But those
Crazy.
are so sensitive that from a whack in the head, from a hit, you can do some damage. Now, it doesn't mean you can't fix that. We talked about the way that you do that pathway.
Sure.
But it does mean that it's going to take some time to do that, and it's going to take a little bit of patience on your part. There's people who I know who have lost their ability to walk or speak, and they've totally gained it back, and if you looked at them, they would be fine. But they did it sort of piece by piece.
Yeah, and let me just wrap it up.
Okay. I gotta go. I'm running.
He's important. So what I was thinking is that what we should do, and we're going to do this on the next episode, is talk about the different centers of the brain.
Okay. Let's go.
We'll do the stages of relapse, the stages of recovery, and we can go over the different neurotransmitters. So that'll be our next episode. It sounds to me in that like there is a lot of hope, because you know you look at it and we're saying some very maybe depressing statistics to you. You know, maybe you're watching this or hearing this and you're saying, okay, wow, well, there's a pretty long timetable. Am I going to be able to make it through this? Here's the thing. You actually have control of your life. Like, you have not been in control. You haven't. You saw black. You actually control the speed and rate that you heal. That's what you just heard. So when you go search for a job, if you go five times a day instead of 2, you're doing something for yourself. If you read your big book or your Bible 10 times a day, that's strengthening that muscle. So the more you put in, the more you're going to get out, and the quicker it's going to happen.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about is sort of authoring your own life, and that is nobody gets to write your life but you.
Yeah.
And so you kind of go, well, what do I want to invest in? I know for me, some of the choices and things I wanted to do, they took 7 years, and that's a long time to sustain it.
Sure.
But we should say this too, and that is, with every beginning, there's benefits right at the very beginning from this. There are immediate changes as well as long term. So it's not like you have to start and then, I don't get the benefit for 7 years. You actually, the brain changes at the moment that you make a good decision.
Right.
At that moment, a physical change happens, which I think is is encouraging.
And when you make a new low, also, it doesn't have to be incredibly high for you to notice it. I mean, things that are kind of normal events are spectacular to you, you know. And as life gets better, you are able to figure out better ways to improve yourself, and I mean that you're able to do it in a shorter amount of time.
Yeah. And that's some of the great stuff, right?
Yeah.
Is just relationships and people in your life and whatever, and those things are the best things, and you can start doing those
Healing,
things. You can start doing those right
now
from the very get-go, so that you go to bed that night and you were like, I did things a little different today, and so that's awesome.
And the last point that I want to make is, you heard it's a muscle. Let's not overcomplicate it. It's not, you know, I thought of this gray ball of mystery, and somewhere in there is my soul and God, and my body functions somehow, and it's so confusing. Just, it's a muscle. If you work it out, it gets stronger.
Mm-hmm.
Let's keep it there. Let's keep it there, and let's end it there. We'll see you next episode.
Sounds good.
Salute. Have a good day. Blessings. All right, buddy.
Awesome. That was awesome, bud. You rocked it. All right.